Good, whatever time of the day it is that you find the time to listen to this. It's been a while. This is my first episode of 2025. I am back to holding the mic, my freaking stand. I had a clamp that would clamp to my desk. I cannot find it. I assume that it is my wife who has misplaced it, displaced it. I don't know where it is at the moment, but we can't stop, won't stop. In the words of the infamous Diddy. In any case, I am back and holding the mic again for a short moment until I have figured out a way to find this out. And you are probably going to watch this, and I may clip it depending on how many of these episodes I make at a time, and then have multiple episodes because I have a lot to talk about. First and foremost, let me just ask you to like, share, subscribe. Definitely is a great way to help. And let me start here. 2025, this is going to be a quarter of a century already into the 2000s. I remember 25 years ago when we were talking about 2K, basically like having everything go to waste. People were wondering whether or not we would just go into an apocalypse, but we are here 25 years into the century, and all this means is that first and foremost, I'm fucking old. And the other thing that it means is damn, time flies, man. And there is no way to describe that to a young person. In any case, just telling you that 11 kilometers per second, let me just tell you exactly why we are here. My role here is to do what many have done in the past, and that is to try to give you my guidance on how it is to live the best life that you can. 11 kilometers per second stands for, it is the speed at which something must move in order to escape Earth's gravity. So it's a metaphor for what we must do to escape the things that hold us back. All right, so I think how I'm going to start this is my new revelation. Okay, so first and foremost, I am a skeptic, but I'm also a thinker. I'm always looking to find the answers to things, everything that is that I feel like is a question. I try to pull on the strings, and then I try to rationalize it. So let's start here. Where have I been? What's happened, man? What has happened is what is life has been motherfucking lifing. And what has happened is what happens to 99% of the people of this world. I don't know what the actual percentage is, but ultimately it is something has gotten into the way of something that I said I was going to do, and I let that derail me. And in this case, I have 2 kids in college and they need to have their tuition paid for. And so the truth is that you can have anything you want. You can't have everything you want. You have to choose which one you're going to do. So like at some point what happened is I was like, okay, well, I need to figure out some things, how I'm going to bring in extra income, and started to, myself and my wife, we just started to move in that direction. And whenever it is that you shift your routine, like it's just very difficult to grab a hold onto something and continue to move in the same direction. Like your life just gets thrown apart, it just gets disheveled. And one of the things that suffered is how I was going to get up every Saturday, which is what I used to do. I used to go to the gym, come back to the gym, and then from the gym, and then shoot a podcast. And that just became hard for that reason, like thinking about these sorts of things, frustrations leading to bickering, which at some point just kind of lowers your own sense of direction, but also your sense of feeling like you've got it right. One of the things that I want to do always is to come at this from a point of authenticity. In some cases, what I feel like I've got the answer to and I'm going to try to, pass that on to you. Now I felt like, you know what, I'm claiming to have answers to this, but then I'm struggling with it. So now I feel like a fraud, to be coming in front of you and telling you how to live a life where, I don't necessarily have it figured out. Now, let me just say that, for one, I think, my sharing this is, part of your authenticity. And I'm hoping that, if you've been in this position and as a human being, there's no way that you haven't been in this position. If you've been in a position where, you had a direction that you were going into, and then, it kind of got derailed for one reason or another, you kind of feel lost, and you feel like, multiple different factors are coming in to make you stop doing the things that you're doing. That is what happens to most of us. This is part of the obstacles of this game that we're playing, and called life, which I'm going to get to with respect to what I believe that we live, in a simulated game. But this is what happens. This is what prevents most people from escaping the things that hold them back, is that something is going to come in the way. And the question is how dedicated, how determined are you to make sure that you're going to get that, going to go wherever it is that you want. And this is why, like, one of the things that did not suffer for me was going to the gym. I mean, there are multiple reasons for that. One is that, all right, let's say I don't get to go in the morning because I'm doing something there. I'll just go in the evening, right? I'll go sometimes sneak in during the afternoon. And so the flexibility of being able to jump into the gym, whatever it is that I want, allowed me to be like, all right, well, things shifting, I can always get in. It also was kind of like the anchor point. There were many days where I just did not feel like going, but, ultimately went. Usually when I'm in there, I got my headphones on. Music is a great way to make me feel good, but you also come out and you feel accomplished. You feel like, I did something hard. I did something that is meaningful. I did something that over the long run is going to leave me in a better place. Like my future self is going to thank me for having taken, this step. And so you come out and if nothing else, you can be like, all right, well, at least I did this and feel like a sense of accomplishment. But more than anything, I think it is two things. I think two more things more than anything. Two more things are true about it. Is one, it's that I see a level of success already. I've always been athletic and things of that nature, but like I see a level of success just from, the way my body looks and, maintaining that and looking at it in the mirror. And this is not to say that I don't see a level of success every now and again with business or with definitely not with the podcast. Like the numbers that I'm comparing it to, is different, but ultimately I think it's the idea that it is like a social thing, right? Like my body, no one actually gets to see except for my family, unless I go to the gym or whatever the case may be. It does. I do once I see it in my mind, I feel like it's known to me, and therefore ultimately, somehow it's conveying a story about the person that I am. And so it helps me to feel that sense of confidence. But at the same time, like I'm not, I guess, it might be different from different people. If I was someone who was obese, all my life, like I probably not necessarily feel the same way that I do, because I'd be starting from a position where it was so much more difficult. And perhaps whenever it is that I did show up to the gym, or when other people are looking at me, I would probably feel a sense of insecurity and feel like there's a social element to it. For me, that's not been the case, but I think this is what it is with everything else, where it's like, it's not just for me, it's not just me, myself, and I. It is what the reaction of other people are. Like, am I getting the subscriptions? Am I getting the likes? Am I getting, those things that indicate that I'm being successful from others? And then same thing with business. Like, sometimes, if you're not making a sale, if, are you, is that personal to you, and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, I think that's one big reason why it's different for me on the gym. But ultimately, I think it is about prioritizing. I think that's the thing. Like with the gym, I said this is something I'm going to make sure gets done. And so it's the same thing with this. And I've been listening to other folks in the podcast, and I appreciate those folks who are doing that. Damn, I forget the guy's name. He or his book. He was on Diary of a CEO. And God, I forget his name at this point. But anyways, those guys were having a conversation. I'll probably, I'll try to get a little clip of them. They were having a conversation about where they started and what it took for them to get there. And, those guys are 10 years younger than me. So they figured this out a lot earlier than I did. But everybody has their own path. And this is mine. And you got amor fati, which is Nietzsche's. Is it Nietzsche? I may be getting that wrong. I think it's Nietzsche. That said, you just have, it's a love of your fate. Ultimately, you have to love your own life. And so with that said, I want to jump right into this whole idea of the game. All right. We are in a game. A game is something that you have chosen to do, that you've created obstacles. And by you, I don't mean you in the game, not the character in the game that's creating the obstacles, but the people outside who are creating this game. So if you've created Mario Brothers, you created Zelda, you have created or somebody has created some rules around it, and then we can choose whether or not to play the game. That's what I believe is happening. There's no one actually really knows, but this is what I believe is happening. And so, this game, the reason to play the game. The reason to play the game is to have fun, right? So if the reason to play the game is to have fun, you have to love the game. Like, whatever character you happen to be in the game doesn't matter. Whatever your storyline is in the game, it doesn't actually really matter. The reason you jump into this game where you can play multiple different characters, or not multiple, but like you can play any number of the characters that you've jumped into to play, is to have fun. That's the only thing that is true in this, right? So that is the reason you would play the game. Now, the game may have an objective, right? So Mario Brothers, the objective is to go and fight King Koopa and free the princess. It's a very similar thing with Zelda. It's to free, I think Link is out to free Zelda from wherever the hell she is. In any case, there is, I'm using these old school games like, so this is, let me just say that this is intended for folks my age, but ultimately you all are going to get here. So if you're a younger person, you learn from this, it's good for you to do so. But this is, the idea is that this thing, ultimately, this organization, this podcast, 11 kilometers per second, is intended for folks who are my age, because it's not over. And I get that, as you're approaching, 40, like you're approaching the idea that, pretty soon you'll have lived more, you have lived more time on this earth than you have left, which is, for me, very scary. Not, I don't know if I want to say scary. It's like, the idea is more like what when you're like staying up all day having a great time, staying up all night having a great time, and then that this thing has, like, I've got to go to sleep soon and start the freaking work day tomorrow or whatever. It's like, God damn, this shit is coming to an end. God, it's like you're missing it already, kind of a thing. For me, I'm already starting to get that. And you know, then there's the physical elements, like your body starts to break down and all this good stuff. And so there's every reason to, not every, there's a lot of reasons to like put young youth on a pedestal. But the idea that folks have done it to the point where they're, especially, yeah, in every community where like more and more like people are just taking this position that, once you get to a certain age, there are things that you shouldn't be trying to do anymore. And it's like, bro, there's so much more in this life to live. Why would you like voluntarily stop doing and having the fun that is intended to be had? Like, no. Like, you do whatever the hell you want. You live it every second of the time that you have. You should live it as if, it is what it is to have the fun that you're intended to have. And so, in any case, what I was saying is that we're in this game. The reason to play is to have fun. Whenever you're not having fun, you're missing that this is the object of the game. And so there are rules that are put into this game. That's what a game is. Like, there's rules that we have put in so that we can kind of figure out how we're going to live, what we're not going to do, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. For us, there are like physical rules. It's kind of like, if you're playing a game where there's boundaries within which you can play. You can't go outside of those boundaries. So like, those would be some of the things, like, if you chop off your head, you no longer get to live in this game anymore. You're out of the game, kind of a thing. And so these are some of the rules that are there, but there are also obstacles that are put into it that makes the game tough. It makes it tough for you, but also what makes it fun. And people don't see that. Like, I remember, my son, myself, like everyone, you probably remember this as well, as when you are playing a game and you lose and you're like, something's happening, you're frustrated, you're screaming at the game, you're pounding the table and all this good stuff. And, at the time that this is happening to you, you're frustrated, you're upset, you're looking at it like it's not good. But if you were to play a game where there were no obstacles whatsoever, that would be the most boring game in the world. But we don't recognize that this is exactly what is making this fun. It's the obstacles. And so the two biggest obstacles that I've talked about in 11 kilometers per second is the fear of judgment of others and the aversion to pain. And pain ultimately is any kind of thing that is different from what we are accustomed to. So that means that comes off as work. And so we want to expend as little energy as possible. It's actually a survival mechanism. So ultimately, we want to survive. And so exerting too much energy is a thing that's not going to allow that to happen. All right. So if you've watched my videos in the past, and you've probably heard me say some of this stuff, but there is also the fear of judgment of others, and that stems from my perspective, right? So the aversion to pain, aversion to work, that's just survival. There's it actually conflicts with the need to thrive, which is another need that we have. It's not necessarily, well, it is one of the objectives of the game, right? It is one of the things that is put into us so that we can take action. So it's like going in and collecting coins and being able to do something with the coins and stuff like that, or being able to buy stuff. And so, like, one of the things that it is that we are trying to, we want to, what people say is self-actualization, but ultimately I think it's about wanting to achieve something. But even then, let me just tell you, I have a lot of thoughts in my mind right now, but people talk about ego. People talk about ego and what that is, and there's been a whole bunch of talk about what it is. And people say, well, ego is there because it's intended to help separate you from the whole. Like, some people talk about the whole being like the whole universe is one, but we are kind of what's the word? We're kind of I don't know what the word is, but I'll say it. Like, we're separating ourselves, and part of that is the ego. So we're not, so we get to actually live this life, experience this life, experience all the things that are associated with it, and so that's the ego is part of that. It's all the things that we think about and try to make ourselves different than everybody else. And so what I submit is that what we have been describing as using the word ego for is essentially our lack of self-worth. I believe that is what is behind everything with respect to like complex thinking, beings. Like you see this in your dog. Like you see this in, anybody that expresses a form of emotion. It might be others, other types of animals too. I'm starting to wonder how much we do or don't know, but it's definitely, animals that are social. And part of what it is, like how you develop it is, and I don't think there's a way around it, is, you're born, you assuming, you presumably know nothing. You have no sense of worth or lack of worth. And, you either have somebody come in and care for you and start to imprint in your mind that here's what you get to have. And then you start to believe, okay, here's the things that I want to have. These are the things that I here's the things that I want. I'm curious about it, and whatever the curiosity is, I want to go and satisfy the curiosity. And so in satisfying the curiosity, I get to do things. This is what I want to do, and I get to go and do it, or I get to satisfy whatever needs that I have, whether it's, to feed myself so I can survive, hunger, whatever the case. It's whatever you want, you start to get it. And then, and that's associated with, power. Right? One of the most powerful, I want to say one of the most powerful beings on the planet are babies, right? Because they ultimately get whatever they want for the most part, whatever. But I mean, physically, they're not powerful, right? Because they can't go out and do it. They have to rely on folks. But in a sense, ultimately, power is when you can think of something that you want, and then you can basically go get it, like an omnipotent being. God in the Bible said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So you think it happened. And so folks who, don't have money, don't have power, they have to do multiple things. I need to go get a job. I need to, maybe go to school, learn a skill, go get a job. Then I have the money, and then there are those who already have that. There is the president of the United States who can like start a world war. Like, what do I want to have happen? And immediately I go and freaking get it. And that's power. So ultimately, one of the, I guess, objectives is to get what you want in order to experience the world the way that you want it, to be as happy as you would, not necessarily happy, to just experience all that this world has to offer. In this game, there are multiple different things that you can experience. You can come back to this game if you died and tried multiple different other realms, and you can go here and there and everywhere. There's let's compare it to an amusement park. You can do this ride and that ride and all this rides, and there are some people who don't do all those rides. It's not to say that they don't get the same level of happiness, because ultimately it's mindset. But you could also do both. You can have the mindset and get to experience it. And so that comes with power. This is the reason why we would want to get money. But ultimately, you still are having fun in the game. And I'm going to come back to why this is important. But we're talking about power, and then we're talking about, lack of self-worth. Okay, so now you have some things that you want for survival, some things that you want for curiosity, and then you get to exercise what you want as a baby, And then eventually there are things that you want that you can't get. And we start to associate, this is part of how we start to associate, self-worth with it. Then there's, how other people are treating us, because they are also wanting certain things, right? They want to create a world that is, easier. They want to create a world where you can live it in a way that benefits you, because ultimately it benefits them. If I'm in a unit, some sort of a family unit or some kind of collective where we're supposed to help each other out, make things easier, build, and so because of that, we promote certain things, right? And so for some people who are helping do these things, we might compare them to those who are not. And the whole idea of, self-worth comes from that, right? It's comparison. Imagine if, it was just the story of, again, I grew up a Christian. And so the story of Cain and Abel is one where that is clear, right? It's, imagine there was only Cain, right? And there's Adam and Eve only has one child. I'm saying, so now the only thing that they do is have to teach him how to toil the land and feed himself and ultimately just survive as long as possible and enjoy it. Like, who is there to compare yourself to? He'd be the greatest, perhaps to his father, but even then it's like, as long as you can feed yourself, what would his father be like? Oh my God, you're not doing it right, or whatever the case may be. But even then, like, I guess the point is still there, that the idea is about comparison, right? This is how there's no other way for it to be there. It's like, who is better than who? And so having others around, having the idea of having more than one person, being social, then basically begs or just requires. It just means that you're going to have a sense of comparison. And so, the lack of self-worth is what's happening, is what starts to happen as a result. Like, am I worthy? Am I the person in your eyes? Comparison again. In your eyes, am I good enough? And that is the root, from my perspective, of everything that has happened. That's why you fear judgment from others, right? Am I worth it? That's why, like, this fear of judgment from others, the one that holds us the back the most, is from the lack of self-worth. It's from everything. And I don't even know yet if I know how to provide more examples of this, but I'm going to do so as I tell different parts of what I want to say here. Any case, here's what I know that's happening right now. We are living in the world of Donald Trump as the president. Again, this is fucking insane if you really think about it. But ultimately, like, this is the type of shit that happens in every country. Like, we are human beings, like, Americans, white people, the great white folks that are ruling this fucking world. They are human beings like everybody else. Now, there are multiple reasons why they happen to be at the top of the totem pole right now, the ones controlling the world, or whatever the case may be. Multiple historical, circumstantial reasons that this is happening. We can't go into all of that. Read Jared Diamond's Germs, Guns, and Steel. I believe I subscribe to his theory on that. But the type of shit where you have cronyism and you have, like, a group of rich people basically controlling what happens in politics and making sure that they fatten their pocket, and has been going on in the U.S. For a long time. I think there was a period where that stopped. I think post World War II, because there was a backlash to that, like a populist movement. And, there's also the idea of creating the middle class, which was basically social engineering and making sure that they're creating the middle class by creating homes and things of that nature. ways for folks to create homes, essentially for other white folks. This is a thing that, a lot of black immigrants and white people fail to see, is that like this middle class that was created was only created for white folks for the most part, who got GI bills and the ability to go buy homes and things of that nature. In any case, we'll get into a whole bunch of other things, but the point here is that like at some point, the idea of how visible and prominent the folks who had money and how they were actually controlling the levers of government was as visible as it is in some of these developing nations where, the corruption is like, the corruption is just, is always like, decried and everybody's talking about it and whatever. In any case, this is what's happening now. We have there's been a lot of pushback now because, at some point we were going in the direction of justice. We had the Martin Luther Kings and all this stuff. The arc of justice is long, or the arc of something is long. I'm so bad at remembering these things. The arc of something is long, but it bends towards justice. And that was what we believed, but I don't know. I think it's just a pendulum that just swings back and forth. And so I think what happened is we were going in that direction, and it just got to the point where I guess it was just too much for everybody. Like the woke movement, where every single group essentially was like, here's the things that we think should happen. And I think this is what happened. Like folks just got tired, and combine that with economic conditions and folks who, damn, there's so much, because economy also, it's the economy, stupid, is so real. When everybody is doing well, there's no reason to complain, unless of course, when not everybody, when the majority, or the people who happen to be in power are doing well, for whatever reason, because they got, the weapons, then there is no reason to complain. The folks who are, subjugated, the black folks, because they're the minority and they don't have power, if they haven't been doing well, there's not much that they can do. But whenever it is that you have either the majority, or the people in power not doing well, or you have, there isn't necessarily, and this is this is another thing too. There are so many different, one of the reasons I think that the developed world, the Western world does well is because of the fact that they are more homogenous, right? In other countries where you have various different ethnic groups, where there isn't a clear majority, and we have various different ethnic groups vying for power. This is what happens in these very diverse countries, is that you can't really have any kind of unity, any kind of movement in one direction, because everybody's vying for power. And so it's like a back and forth. And, if the country happens to be doing so well that everybody, benefits from it, then there might be no issues. But then whenever it is that there is any kind of swing in the economy, then no one gets to control, that's when you're going to have internal strife. Ultimately, this is what's happening in the United States. It's the growing diversity, right? White folks are not doing well, and then Hispanics are coming in, and their numbers are their population numbers are rising as compared to the white folks, and then you get hit with what's happening in the global economy. Technology is taking away jobs. Folks had assumed that, we were just going to continue to rise, and made some bets, particularly in education, especially in the black community, thinking this is all that they needed to do in order to become successful. I know that I'm a victim of this. So it's like, okay, just make sure you go to school, take out the loans, do all this other things. And ultimately that would mean that things would continue to rise, and then it didn't. And so there's a lot of bitterness and resentment and just disappointment about what was supposed to be that did not materialize. And in any case, diversity is causing a bunch of that. And what you have then is that what you have then in this space where where things are going bad, and you have you know and you have this pendulum swinging back, because the folks who for the most part operate on emotions, we operate on emotions because of the lack of self-worth. This is where it's a good point to come in and talk about, right? Anything, we either have we either have something that is like, we have certain programming that allows us to survive, meaning stay in this game as long as possible. Like I said, one of them is aversion to pain. Not wanting to work is actually just laziness, rather, is actually just our desire not to expend energy. Because expending too much energy means we might not have it in times when we might need it. Or like, if you really get to the point where you expend as so much energy, like you can literally like just crap out, like your frame and whatever could just crap out, just too much, right? And just, go out of whack. And plus, obviously these days, like, we have organized ourselves in such a way that we can continuously like provide ourselves for food and sustenance. But like back in the days, it was very difficult for us to do that. So like, expending energy when you didn't know when your next meal was going to come from would have been a terrible survival instinct for us to be out here like trying to use as much energy as possible. All right, but that's it. What we have is a other survival programming, right? One of which is, our emotions, right? Our emotions are supposed to tell us certain things, like anger, for example, is something that will then get you to the point where you can confront a threat, right? You are about to get attacked by another person or an animal. If you get angry, you can then exercise the fight part of the fight or flight kind of thing. If you get fearful, that's the tool that we were programmed with that allows you to flee, right? Now, fight or flight, you fear, you run away, or you fear, you don't go to some place where you might have danger. That is a threat. Even sadness can be or pitiful, or, sadness, or all the different versions of it, depression, all that stuff, can be said to be a response, right, to a potential threat, right? Because if you're sitting here looking pitiful, like you need, like I've seen this video, if I can find it, I'll put it up, like of a predator, like one of these big cats, chasing down, I think it was like a gazelle or something like that. Chasing down a gazelle not chasing down, because the gazelle was still, and she ran up on the gazelle. The gazelle is having a baby, like right there. The gazelle is just like, she just drops the baby as he's coming out. Drops the baby, takes off. It's like, we are not both going to die. Damn, I just lost my baby. Like, the gazelle takes off, baby drops to the ground. And then the big cat comes in, and instead of eating the food, this is so interesting because I just watched Mufasa, and this was always the thing, right? And they talk about this, they comment on it too, because I think everybody's talking about this, like, these guys are treating the king like their food. All this stuff is their food, and then they're like coming in and bowing down and cooperating with the lion, who ultimately is going to eat them. But anyways, the big cat comes in, and I think there was another like predator. I don't know what kind it is. I hope I can find this thing and put it up. But the the cat comes in, takes the baby off the ground, runs away with the baby, climbs a tree so that they can get him away from the hyena. I think it was hyena, because hyenas can't climb. They're dogs essentially. So takes the big cat comes in, climbs up the tree, and protects the baby. So she's about to go in and eat the mother and then decides to protect the baby. And so for me, I mean, this says a couple of things. One is clearly like you looking pitiful, looking sad can engender sympathy. Now that is the relying on others, the goodness of others, right? The anger piece as opposed to sadness. The anger is I'm going to take it off on my own. Sadness is I'm going to rely on others for whatever it is that I get. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but let me finish the point on this one. That's one thing that it tells me. The other thing that it tells me is that clearly, if we consider that this is very similar to the kind of feelings that we have, one of the things that we have as human beings is the desire to help others, right? The desire to help, we want to make others good. And I want to make this statement because I want to bring it back up later to talk about the difference between, the reason why power can be exercised or should be. The reason why it's good for power to be exercised in a way that helps others as compared to, the one where you would be, well, I'm just thinking strategically now, not emotionally. So why should I care what others think if this is benefiting me and I get to experience whatever that I want? Right? It seems to me that this is an indication that this is something that we also want. It's a programming in us that allows us to experience this game, this life into the best of our ability. It's the ability to help others as well. It's one of the tools that are there. If you're here to experience this life in its optimal form, one of the ways to do that is to help others. It's not just, hey, what benefits me, but what benefits me and helps others as well. Okay, but in any case, before I go more into that, what I want to say is that let me talk a little bit more about those two different emotions and how, before I forget, and this is kind of jumbled up, but that's fine. But the difference between like the anger emotion and the sadness emotion, one is, you would assume, because I just said that the anger one is like, I'm going to fight. I'm going to rely on myself. I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do. Sadness is, one where in which you, the one where in which you are essentially relying on the kindness of others, like, help me out. Now, this would seem that the better thing to do is anger, right? And I think, and my theory is that this is what men have been trained to do, right? I mean, obviously, we're the physically stronger folks. So like back in the days, caveman, savannah walking days. And we're talking about early human beings where we, basically had to take care of the physically weaker sex, the ones that would essentially take care of our babies and, feed our babies because they had the way to do that, which it forms the basis of this patriarchal society that people lament so much. It's like it's biological. But in any case, when that was the case, it was like, okay, well, the man had to develop anger, and we have kept that on. Like the only real emotion that a man is supposed to to a certain extent, obviously, being angry in the wrong place is looked down upon in civilized society when, depending on the level, the what you do with that anger is wrong. But ultimately, like, it's still the case that men can't be crying or, socially, like, crying and being sad and all that good stuff is not something that we do. So we we pushed men to just look at the anger and the ability to come in and fight and do for yourself, and it's looked at as the thing that is more noble. And in a world where manual labor, physical labor, your physicality was important, that was a big thing. We are living in a world economy where it's more like service based. Like, we've created technology and robots that do most of the physical things that we need right now. And so if you really think about it, what's needed more is what forms the basis of manipulation and sadness. This is another reason why I think women are doing much better, or doing much better, especially in the black, in that African American community, but also definitely, around the U.S. where, there's enough freedoms for women to actually exercise the skill of what I think eventually essentially amounts to manipulation, right? And that word is a loaded word. But what I mean by it to make the point is like women are very skilled at socially, like in the ability to have, interactions where in which they are now attempting to exercise their power, get what they want, not from forcing you, but from, so maybe manipulation is not the best word to use. And the reason I'm using this is because it can lead to manipulation. It doesn't necessarily lead to manipulation, and it often does for those who, have learned about the, for those who have learned about the level of power that they actually have, like the ones who realize, whoa, I look at what I can do with this ability, this talent, this skill that I have, and being able to have interactions, and oh my God, look at what I'm getting, and as a result, I think the sadness piece is forms the foundation of that. It's looking at you, knowing that you want to help, and trying to figure out how to get you to behave based on that feeling. What is the word for that? Somebody knows it, but in any case, I think the word that I think for me describes this better in a sense of, wielding that power is to manipulate. And I don't know that you can manipulate towards good ends. You can manipulate a man as a woman. You can manipulate a man to go take actions that are in his interest. You can also manipulate him to take actions that are in your interest and not in his interest. But ultimately, it's that social skill. It's that ability to use that social skill as opposed to force. And I just wanted to make mention of that, because I think what we need to do as men trying to, skill up for this new world that we have is to rely more on our ability to influence others, to manipulate others, to build social skills, to rely on something other than, just our physical nature and the anger that comes behind it. But just to come back to the emotion thing, because I think I have now gotten a little bit more on what I mean by, lack of self-worth and emotions, right? And so anger, when it is for a legit threat, sadness, when it is for a legit threat, is just a tool that is used to get you to get away from that threat. What has happened with lack of self-worth, like I said, when we're talking about lack of self-worth, it inherently has a social component to it, right? Because I'm comparing myself to others. All right. In the same sense, when you're talking about that social component, where then that tool that was created to help you overcome a threat, you're now using it because of that social component. It is in every instance a bad thing, and it is one that is associated with lack of self-worth. If you get angry because someone has said something to you that you do not like, it is not necessarily a threat to your life or to your survival. It is you now starting to think, does this person think they're better than me? That's the comparison. Am I worthy? In fact, sadness is another way that you might respond. This is a way that, a man would probably be like, oh, you said something to me, I might get physical with you. A woman might, use her words in a harsh way and all that good stuff. And, or, ultimately they may just be sad and go coil and they'll retreat in a corner. hoping that, you take pity on them. But ultimately what it is come down to a lack of self-worth. In fact, what I realized, and this brings me back to the whole Trump thing, what I realized is that even the idea that you're better than someone else, and I'm not talking about, oh, I have more skills than you because I've worked on the skill, but like I'm better than you as a human being. The idea that you have that feeling is based on a lack of self-worth. Because if you ever think about it, if you think about the time, and this is the thing that I had to do, I had to think about the time when how did I get to this position? I think I was listening to a thing on a different attachment styles. Okay, so if you're not familiar with attachment styles, it is, from my perspective, the way that I describe it is either a defense mechanism, from your insecurities. I don't know that they would describe it that way, but this is how I came to it. It's a defense mechanism from some kind of insecurities that you have that manifests itself in either your being, avoidant, meaning anything that may trigger your insecurities, you're going to run from. I'm going to, or this is the avoidant attachment style. And then there is the anxious attachment style. Or if you're not avoidant, the way you respond is like to cling to it. Like, oh my God, please love me. My God, don't leave, kind of a thing. And so in relationships, because this is what this was, this is often associated with, that the attachment styles in relationships, you're a lot of times you're going to have toxic relationships that are born from having different attachment styles. So a person who is avoidant coming into a relationship with somebody who's anxious is just going to be toxic because they want different things. The anxious person wants more assurance, wants more closeness, is clinging on to it. The avoidant one is running from it. And the avoidant one, a lot of times, is going to, because of their own insecurities, is going to, do stuff to push the other person away. Just, a lot of things that's associated with just being an asshole, just not, providing the kind of love people think is deserving, just being aloof or not wanting to talk. All the stuff that people would associate with being an asshole is what, they say of the avoidant style. I actually tend to be an avoidant, avoidant attachment in my insecure defense mechanism. But in any case, what was so I was watching the video, and then I was reading the comments, and then one person said something like, this is just somebody who thinks they're better than you, and when it's too late, they realize that they aren't, but at that point it's too late, and they treat you like an asshole. And I was like, wow, that is an insight right there. Is it because I think I'm better than the people that I behave in an avoidant style with, and I had the conclusion that that they were wrong. The avoidant, that they were not wrong, but like in that situation, that may be the case, that they're behaving that way because they think they're better than you. To that person, but the avoidant is always avoiding whether or not they think they're better. In fact, the defense mechanism when they think that that they are not better is just not to engage, right? They won't build relationships. They'll just leave those relationships. They won't form them. The difference is that if you are an anxious attachment style, you are clinging. So whereas he probably would have run away from you because of your anxious attachment style, you're clinging, and so you're not going away. This is why these relationships in the form, and it's like this is the only way that they can actually have relationships. The avoidance style, they'd be running away from everybody. Except if you're a clinger, If your attachment style is anxious, you're going to stay around. You're going to essentially get abused because he is exercising his own insecurity by pushing away. The more you want, the more he's pushing away. And so she was wrong in that. But there is the element of him thinking now, because he is pushing and you're clinging, that he is now better. It makes him feel better. But he also needs to feel that, because this is how he then feels good about himself. And this is something that you've probably heard all the time. It's like, somebody putting you down to feel better. And so if you've ever been in an argument where you have, for the most part, always thought you knew more than somebody else. I occupy this position where I feel better than I know more than you. And that person, either during that argument or because they have been learning and growing or whatever, they are now starting to challenge your understanding of your own dominance in this field. What you will see is that you will fight. This is part of the reason why we so identify with our opinions, ultimately, what it comes down to in an argument. If we identify so much with our opinions, is because we need to feel better than you to feel good. It is ultimately our own, like when we're sitting there thinking we're better than somebody, it's ultimately because we need that to feel good about ourselves. So meanwhile, you're sitting here thinking about yourself as being better than if you dig deeper, the real issue is that you don't feel good at all. You don't feel you like yourself. Well, that would be the only reason why you would need to be better. If it didn't matter one way or another, if you didn't care, if you felt comfortable, it would be okay for that person to be right. It would be okay for them to know more than you, because the confident person is okay knowing that they don't know. If you've ever been in a position where you were feeling confident and somebody came in and started telling you all these other things, you're not like threatened by it. You're like, wow, you're intrigued. You want to know more. You're even like, you're complimentary. You're because you know so much about what you know and are comfortable so much about what you bring to the table that it doesn't matter whether or not the person is better than you. That's real confidence. And so the person who is out there feeling arrogant and ultimately positioning themselves as being better than you, it appears like confidence to most people. This is why I used to really like, I still like him, but I guess I used to look at Kanye. I knew there was something off about him, but I made a lot of arguments as to why it is that this is a man who is just like living the pure life. And there's a lot of truth to that, right? There is, like, we're human beings, we're complex people. Complex beings, and we can have multiple things be true at the same time that may seem at odds. But so it is true that I think that, Kanye West is trying to live an authentic and truthful and honest life. Here's what I feel, here's what I'm going to do. But I also think that he is a person who is a narcissist rather than just confident. He needs to constantly feel like he is better in order to fill this void in his mind about whether or not he is actually worthy. This is what's happening with Trump as well. And I tell you that Trump is bringing in the era of the narcissist. And one of the ways that I realized this too, even before I formed these thoughts, is when I watched, Jamie Foxx's special when he came back. And, then I recognized what confidence was. I was like, wow, that is the difference between him and Kanye West. Jamie Foxx does not feel like he's better than him. He feels like he's one of us. Feels like he's one of us, despite how talented this man is, despite all the accomplishments and all those things that he has done. He doesn't necessarily put himself above us. He's like, nah, I feel comfortable with what I have, but I'm not better than anybody. That's like when you thanking the crowd and talking about how Atlanta saved his life and all that good stuff. This is a person who is not here talking about how much better than they are than you, but they are comfortable with themselves and what they bring to the table. And that is confidence. And so a lot of that will be missed by folks who are looking at Trump's win. They're looking at Trump's win, and they're looking at, what he's been able to, what a group of people who are operating themselves out of a lack of self-worth, who are looking at this and thinking, wow, you know what, I want that kind of power. I want to be able to like, if you feel powerless, if you feel like you can't, you can't get the things that you want. You're like, one of the things that is going to attract you is somebody who seems like they're able to exercise that. It's going to be like, oh my God, he's able to do whatever it is that he wants. He's able to, like, yes, this is the kind of thing I need to do as well. I need to go in and just force my way and do what I want. And that seems very attractive to a lot of people who are missing that, that this is a person who actually doesn't necessarily feel good about themselves. They're doing this to prop themselves up, number one. Okay. And if you were necessarily confident, then you don't necessarily need anybody to prop. I can coexist with you. You can be as great as you are. And I know I'm great. And so I don't necessarily have to force anything or force anyone to do anything. All right. That's a true definition of confidence. And then, before, what I want to do is I want to talk about the difference between, power. I just alluded to that with respect to, not just, but I alluded to that I was going to get into this conversation when I talked about the gazelle, and the need for folks to actually help folks, for human beings or beings, complex, emotional, social beings, to help one another out. And so I want to talk about, like, the difference between power and how you wield it. But before I go into that, let me finalize a thought on the reason why, in this game, and what I've learned and what I'm using right now to help me to not exercise my lack of self-worth in a way that uses the tools for survival, the emotions that are there for survival, in a way that, ultimately means that I'm impacting someone else and even myself, by using fear of judgment of others, anger, all those other things, in a way that impacts myself and others as well. And so, here's the tool, here's the understanding. And, one of the things that I want to say is, that once you have this understanding, it doesn't mean that the emotions go away. Those are, these are habitual. They're in your body. Like, you feel them. They're not going to go away. You have to be willing to constantly, have that conversation. I'll do some more episodes where I, speak directly to that as well, but I'm just going to mention it here because there are so many things that I have to say. But, let's go back to the idea of the game, right? The game that we're playing, the reason we play is to have fun. And so inside the game, there is no real value. There's no value. Like, inside the game, there's value, rather, but there's no real value. Like, so I'm playing Mario Brothers. There's value in how high a score you made, how you jumped on the flag and brought it down, and all the other things there's so many different things, how many levels you rose up to, all this other stuff. But ultimately, there's a ton of people who did not play Mario Brothers, will not play Mario Brothers. And, if you're thinking outside of that game, there's no value, no real value in that game. It's the same way for life. The only thing that we know for sure, and I've said this in other episodes, but I'm going to repeat it here, either because, not either because, you may not have heard it, or if you have heard it, then to make this point here, there is no real value in life other than the fact that we are here living it. Every human being has the same experience, the same emotions, the same ability to experience this world. This is the only thing that's of real value. Everything else is us making it up. Everything else. Like, if you think about the fact that how much we pay somebody for dribbling a basketball and shooting it into a round hoop with a net in it. If you think about all the different things, even the things that we say is, productive. Like, okay, well, he knows math and all this other stuff. Nobody actually needs to do that. Like, yes, it helps in the game. In fact, I mean, being entertained helps. So like basketball, you're being entertained, it helps in the game. But ultimately, what does it help you to do? It helps you to be able to eat, which is survival. It helps you to be able to have, emotions. I mean, or rather, we all have these emotions. We can't, like, if you have, this is why, again, people with wealth and power end up taking their lives regardless of the fact that they have wealth and power. This is why, a whole bunch of folks will tell you that, you work to this point, ultimately because a lot of them have voids that they're trying to fill. And so this is why they work their ass off to get to this point. And they realize, oh my God, it doesn't satisfy the need. Is because ultimately, whether or not you enjoy this thing is whether or not this thing called life is whether or not you have the perspective that is there for you to enjoy every second of it, every emotion, every up, every down, every obstacle that's put in your way. If that is your perspective, you're going to have just as much happiness as the person who has done everything else. Right. So ultimately, everyone has the same ability to share that same level of happiness, joy, and experience love and emotions and all the other things in between as everybody else, regardless of what you do. And in that sense, you can literally be a monk. You can be a monk. A Buddhist monk does not do, like, they take a vow of poverty. They don't do anything. But, are they not living as great as a life as anybody else? I don't think so. You don't have to go out and start to go and do any of those things. Just live and experience this life. That's the thing that's of real value. Now, understanding that does not then mean that you cannot choose to play the game. But if you're choosing to play the game, understand that the idea is that you're going to have fun. So anytime when you find yourself having an emotion that is sadness, that is pity, that is whatever, that is not conducive to you thinking that this game is intended for fun, then you have lost the reason for that. And you are using a tool intended for survival for the wrong reasons. You're using it because you're questioning your self-worth. You're questioning your self-worth because you think the value is what's in the game as opposed to just playing the game. No, you're playing the game. You're trying to accumulate different things. And that's fine, but you don't have to do it with a sense of lack of self-worth. So instead, what you can do then, and this is what I do, is recognize, all right, no, I'm playing a game. There is no real value here. The only value is me being able to play it. I can enjoy it every moment, but I am choosing to play this game. I am choosing to exercise the different things that would allow me to have as wide of an experience as I want, which means that I can try to go out and get power. That means I can try to go out and get money, which ultimately means power because it gives you the ability to do what you want, facilitate the things that you want. I can go and do that, whether, or not somebody has said something to try to make me think that it is, that my worth is less. If I know that this is not to be the truth, is not the truth, then I don't have to operate out of emotion. Instead, what I can say is, all right, I am playing the game in order to accumulate power. I'll get back to power. Power, meaning the ability to do what I want. I am trying to do that, to experience the world as much as possible, as much of the world as possible. I am playing that game. And I do not, at this point, have the kind of power that I want. So I'm going to choose to go to school. All right. The first thing is, when you've done that, what you've done is you've accepted the reality for what it is. You've accepted. So that's the first. Well, that's the second thing. The first is to realize that there is no value here. Whatever it is, the lack of value that you're putting in, brush that off. It's not real. It's not true. I'm not going to operate from the emotion that comes from my feeling of lack of self-worth. Number two thing is then to be like, okay, I accept that I don't have the kind of power that I would like to have to exercise and then have the things that I want. You accept. The third thing then is to embrace, appreciate. And embrace and appreciate means that you embrace the challenge of trying to get that you embrace the challenge of playing that part of the game. You embrace it and you appreciate it. Like, yes, this is a good thing. This is part of what makes this thing worth living. This is the obstacle in a way that makes it fun. This is the love of my fate that I am now exercising to go in and go and play this game, this fun game that I have the privilege of being on this earth to play. I'm going to now appreciate that. And so that is the way. And no, again, I'm going to repeat, you do not, and I repeat, you do not, because you have, if this is resonating with you, as it did with me, hopefully it is, and I'm sure that some people are going to find it, you do not, one of the biggest ways is to have expectations that now I've learned it and now everything else is going to be downhill. No. Now you've learned it and now you got to practice it. Your habits are your habits. You have to create a different habit. But one of the things that makes this thing great is the recognition that you can become anything that you practice if you do it, if you're willing and determined to do it long enough. If this is the kind of thinking that you are determined to have, then you start, every time that feeling comes in, every time that thought comes in, you now remind yourself over and over again, okay, yep, this is not a value. Okay, embrace it. And eventually you will get to that point. I'm in the process right now myself. I am not there yet. It's a revelation, and I intend to get there eventually. In any case, so yes, now power. Let's address that. Why power? Again, like I said, power is just the ability to think something that you want to have happen and have it happen. And so there was this thing that I had read about, same thing about the narcissist, because the people who are running this country right now, the Donald Trumps of the world, Elon Musk, they're all narcissists, folks who appear to have it all together, and they have power, right? And that's one of the reasons why it seems so appealing. And that doesn't mean that they have happiness. There's a way to have both, and there's no reason why you can't try, because ultimately, having that power, seemingly in to everyone else feeling good, but even in your own self, sometimes you might go grow drunk with the power, but ultimately every day you're fighting it. You're like you're pushing against it. You're trying to fill this void every day. Oh my God, I'm good enough every day, as opposed to the point that I'm trying to say is getting into the state where you have become the kind of person who does not have those kinds of things, and then deliberately and strategically going to go out and trying to get the power so you can do the kind of things that you want. That to me is a better condition to be in than the one where you're essentially running fear of being nothing and ultimately having it's just constantly this thing is constantly behind you. It's like living in a horror movie in a way, even though you might feel good in the moment, you're kind of living in a horror movie, because every second that you have where you're not feeling that sense of goodness, where the drunkenness is not there, when the hangover is there, here comes that threat right behind you again. I'm not good enough. And so that to me is not necessarily the best way to go about it, not the optimal way to live. And so for me, then, if I were, then, this is what happened with Elon Musk, is that, I read a story, I think it was on NPR, I heard a story on NPR where it was was it NPR? Something, I think it was NPR. In any case, Elon Musk came, and fired I think it was 20% of Tesla. I think it was Tesla. And people walked in, they described a scene of like top engineers coming into work and not knowing anything what was going on. And then the way that they found out that they were fired was like their badges didn't work. Like they came to work and like tried to get in, their badges wouldn't work, and then they was like, yeah, you've been let go. Like 20% of the people. And it was like, God damn. Like I remember when I heard that, this was before I completely formulated my theory of the game and all that good stuff. I remember when I heard that, it was like, wow, this is like, and they said, okay, why did he do that? He was like, well, the reason he did it was, they thought it was some legit reason or something like that. And then when they found out what the reason it was, is because like he wasn't paying attention to Tesla. He had his mind elsewhere, like SpaceX or Neuralink or whatever the case may be. And then he started paying attention and he realized, okay, we had lost, revenues of about 20%. So naturally, what I'm going to do is just like bluntly cut 20% of the workforce, like, just cut 20% of the workforce. And, I remember listening to that and thinking, oh my God, this is the kind of power that like it was attractive to me then. And that's kind of what led me to what I was thinking, because I was like, damn, is that good? And I had to trace this, I had to pull the string on that. Like, is this the kind of world that we're living at where, okay, I did say that you should not be operating off of emotion. And so, this is a guy who's exercising the power to do what he wants in a world where I said power is good because you can do what you want. And now why would he do this? Because he thinks that it's going to impact somebody. Like, why not? Because this is what works. Well, ultimately, what I, through following, for me, the logical string, what I had to come to the conclusion of was that this wasn't something that was necessarily strategic. Like, it seemed more like an emotional thing. Like that blunt tool of just cutting 20% was not thought through. Like, what if it wasn't the workforce at all? What if it was some other thing? Like, what if next quarter or whatever it was, you're going to lose another 20% because you actually didn't find a real problem? And also, like, there could have been a way for you to do that without impacting people, or, at the very least to give them a chance, right? Like, okay, here's where, like, not just walking up to, the door and finding out your badge doesn't work. Why be an asshole? Like, you can exercise your power in a way that doesn't necessarily impact people. And the reason that that's good ultimately is the example I gave you with the gazelle and the big cat, where ultimately that's something that's put into us that we want. And so if you're thinking about living the ideal, the optimal life, then you would do that precisely because that also is one of the things that would help you ultimately, is to be kind to others. It helps you fulfill your own desires as a human, unless of course you're a sociopath. And what I'm told is that the sociopaths don't have that feeling. But hey, the other reason that is even beyond that is the rules that we're creating. Ultimately, like, the values that we have that we're creating, a lot of them are good. Like, we create certain things, at least in the Western world, we create the need for self-defense, right? That's a threat's coming, we can defend ourselves. This is where, the fight element of the fight or flight is. But ultimately, we don't want to live in a world where people are being manipulative, right? Like, we aspire to being moral in a way that, helps everybody out, altruistic and all that good stuff. And I think that rule is good because you never know when you're going to find yourself in a position where you do not have that power. None of us come into this world having power. We all come in as babies, and ultimately we can get folks to do what we want, but ultimately, we have no physical strength and we have to rely on others. And if you happen to be in a world where, you are born to people of power, it is great, but what if you were born to the folks who weren't people of power, right? If you come into this earth and your rules are, like the 48 laws of power, how do I get power? You focus on that as opposed to the altruistic one, then you can't espouse both, right? Like if you were to create this world where if you were to snap your fingers and say the way that I want this world to be is for folks to try to get power and wield it however they want. Now, everybody then does this, right? Everybody, like, because this is what it is that you have said is the principle of this world. This is how the world runs. This is the principle. Everyone now is looking for how to manipulate one another and figure out how to get power over another, one up everybody. That would be a terrible world to live in. And so you can't say here is the principle but hope nobody else does it. This only applies to me. Yes, you can secretly do it, but like if you secretly do it, then you're not saying that this is how you want everybody else to live. You're not saying this is the concept of the world. You wouldn't create a book called 48 Laws of Power so that everybody can try to do that. If you think about the idea that you don't want this, and even if you say, okay, well, I'm not born to that race. Maybe I get to choose which one I go into, which, from wherever it is, whatever realm it is that we come into this earth, assuming we get to choose. I would imagine that we don't. Otherwise, why would anybody choose to live in a world where they don't have power? Also, like, you literally have folks who are born to parents where, who are crack addicts and all kind of drug addicts. So you're necessarily going to live a terrible life. Like, why would you choose that? So assuming that, we don't choose, then yes, you don't want to create a world where you end up being born to a family or a group of people that do not have power. But even if you are, like, things change. Like, there's been multiple revolutions. There have been folks who were in a position of power who no longer have power right now. Saddam Hussein's family no longer has power. Hitler, no one I think they literally had to kill off they stopped having babies to kill off that line, from my understanding, because that's the nature of what happens when things shift. So even if you are a person who is born in power, if this is the kind of world that you are trying to build, it is not in your interest ultimately. And so this is not the one that we should try to build. And so understanding it is that kind of logical thinking that ultimately leads me to believe that Elon Musk should not, and we should not, choose to exercise the power. It is in our own interest not to exercise the power in a way that is against, that would, not benefit everyone as much as people as we can, if we can choose to do so. And so, any case, what we have, unfortunately, in this world that we live in, and I'm about to go into some politics real quickly as I end this, is what we have. And I don't know that folks, I was having a conversation with a friend from Liberia, and she said, like, her mother talks about, or I think she was younger as well, about the time when they left Liberia. They thought it was going to be a short stint, because some upheaval was happening, and it ended up being like they stayed in America forever because of the war. In Liberia, her father had gotten stuck there. He was able to find his way out eventually, but we were having that discussion because she is like, looking at the world that we have right now. We are literally like 5.5 days into Trump's presidency, and we've seen the emboldened, Proud Boys, Ku Klux Klan members starting to, rear their heads, and Trump is like dismantling everything, and everybody is looking at this and thinking, okay, well, I know that America has always been stable, so I think it's just going to remain stable. And I hope they're right. I'm hopeful. Like, maybe what ends up happening is like we get, a period of prosperity, like that we weren't expected, and that, bolts everyone into power. I'm hopeful, but I'm also weary that it may be completely the other way around. And this is what she was saying. Like, what I see is, you know, a group of people who are going to operate out of emotions, and they're already angry and they think this is their time. And I see that those who think that this is alarming are not going to be able to sound the bell loudly enough for folks to listen, because they're going to be attracted to Trump's seeming successes. But because the real reason for, you know, the structural issues with the United States in terms of its economy have not really been fixed, nothing is going to change. Ultimately, you're not going to be able to bring back a lot of jobs and make people feel a sense of purpose when AI is coming in and taking over and going to drop more and more people out of the labor force. You're not going to be able to do that when global manufacturing is not coming back to the United States. You're not going to be able to fix any of those things with what it is, like the national debt, like all of the things that are structurally wrong. Trump is not going to be able to fix that. And so what's going to happen is a couple years down the line, you know, as these people start to agitate and do things in ways that, you know, creates a sense of a need to fight. Because I think there's going to be a whole bunch, and I know, based on the conversation that we were having, that same friend of mine, we were having the conversation with a whole bunch of other black folks who are like, nah, we've got to, you know, figure out how to we got to get some guns and be prepared and all this other stuff. And it's like, there's going to be a whole bunch of that, because these people are naively thinking that this is a fight that can be won, you know, violently. Like, you know, like one of the things that they said was like, do you remember when you know, the Black Panthers showed up to Congress with their guns and things? Like, it's like, bro, like, they subsequently dismantled and had everyone in the Black Panthers killed. They killed all of our peoples. Like that wasn't what happened. Was not a victory for us, you know, at least not in that sense. Like what won it for us was the sadness piece, right? It wasn't the fight. It wasn't the anger. It was the sadness. It was like, yo, it was Martin Luther King saying, you know, white people, look at what you're doing. Essentially, take pity. That's what the civil rights was about, and that's what won it out. Like, it was nonviolence that got it. It was nonviolence. It was seeing how we were being brutalized on TV that made people say, nah, this can't happen. And this is the difference between the U.S. and you know, like North Korea. Like, North Korea, you don't see any of those images coming out. So no one's going to know that this is actually taking place. There's no one that's going to look at your sadness and be impacted by it. And so, like, you know, what I think is going to happen for those people who think that fighting back is going to help is it's going to create the excuses that is needed for Trump when things do not go right, to give the red meat to the people who supported him. That is one thing he knows how to do well. This is why he's winning again, because he knows what these white folks wanted. They're feeling dejected, and they're feeling demoralized, and, you know, he's like, oh, okay, you want somebody to blame? Let me give you the Mexican so I can win. You want somebody to blame? Let me give you DEI so I can win. You know. And then now, when things start to go wrong again, and when we start to fight back and these people get more and more emboldened, he's going to give them more. And that's going to also allow him to cover his own ass. And that's the thing. That's why he's dangerous. He's not dangerous because he actually believes this. I don't care whether, like, he truly believes that he's dangerous because he is all about himself, and he's willing to do whatever it takes at anyone's expense, at the country's expense, in order to cover his ass. That is pure narcissism. That is not the kind of thing that is going to help anybody out. And I'm weary that this is the direction that we're going in the age of narcissism, as compared to whether the possibility and the hope that I'm wrong, and that, we're going to be rolling in some dough. But because, we'll see what happens with that. But in any case, that is my episode for today. I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on some of the things that I've mentioned here. It's been a while and loved it. Appreciate you. All right. We'll talk soon. Bye.